The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast hall. Ambassador James Reed walked slowly down the central aisle, his black diplomatic uniform standing out against the colorful array of alien delegates that filled the curved seating areas. The chamber was built to intimidate, with its towering ceiling and walls covered in symbols from 1,000 different worlds. But James kept his face calm and his steps steady. Hundreds of eyes, sensors, and other detection organs followed his movement. Some delegates whispered among themselves in languages that sounded like grinding metal or flowing water. Others simply stared with barely hidden contempt. The humans had requested this emergency session 3 days ago. After the destruction of New Eden, most of the council members already knew why he was here, and most of them didn't care. James reached the speaking platform at the center of the chamber. The circular design meant that alien delegates surrounded him on all sides, looking down from their elevated seats. It was meant to make speakers feel small and powerless. For 300 years, human ambassadors had stood in this exact spot, pleading for basic rights and fair treatment. Today would be different. Honored council members, James began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced sound system. I stand before you to address the unprovoked attack on the human colony of New Eden. A wave of chittering laughter came from the insect-like Kralix delegation. Their translator made it sound like metal being scraped against stone. Council leader Thane of the Vorthan Empire didn't even look up from the datapad he was reading. His blue-scaled face showed complete boredom. 2 million human civilians were killed when Vorthan warships destroyed our agricultural world, James continued. Men, women, and children who were simply trying to grow food for their families. The Vorthan commander claimed they were conducting pest control operations. More laughter rippled through the chamber. The crystalline Nexari delegate's body flashed with colors that James knew meant amusement. The squid-like Tenthari delegation made wet slapping sounds with their appendages, which served as their version of applause. Thane finally looked up from his datapad, his cold yellow eyes fixed on James with obvious irritation. Human Reed, he said, using the deliberately insulting form of address. Your species continues to expand into territories where you are not wanted. New Eden was built too close to our shipping lanes. We had every right to remove the obstruction. New Eden was 3 light years from the nearest Vorthan trade route. James replied, it posed no threat to your operations. Everything your species does poses a threat, interrupted Delegate Crix of the Kralix. Her mandibles clicked together as she spoke. You breed too fast. You consume too many resources. You ask for too much representation in this council. New Eden was just the beginning of what needs to be done. The chamber erupted in approving sounds from dozens of different species. James stood quietly in the center of it all, waiting for the noise to die down. He had heard similar words many times before. For 3 centuries, humanity had been the galaxy's punching bag. Their trade ships were seized without cause. Their colonies were raided by pirates that everyone knew were backed by council members. Their diplomatic protests were ignored or laughed at. When the chamber finally grew quiet, James spoke again. The Galactic Charter, which all council members signed, guarantees the right of peaceful expansion for all sentient species. It also prohibits the targeting of civilian populations. Charters are for equals, Thane said dismissively. Your species has contributed nothing to galactic civilization. You have no advanced technology to share. Your art is primitive. Your philosophy is simple-minded. You are here only because the Charter requires it, not because you deserve it. The Nexari delegates. Crystalline form chimed like wind bells. Through their translator, the sound became words. The Vorthans speak truth. Humans are resource drains. They take more than they give. Perhaps fewer human worlds would benefit all. James felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't just about New Eden anymore. The council was openly discussing the elimination of human colonies. He looked around the chamber and saw the same sentiment reflected in hundreds of alien faces. They weren't just dismissing humanity's complaints. They were planning to do something about the human problem permanently. "I see," James said quietly. "So the council's position is that the destruction of New Eden was justified." "More than justified," Thane replied. "Necessary. And it will continue to be necessary until your species learns its proper place in the galaxy." "And what place is that?" Thane's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. "Servants, perhaps slaves. Your species is good at following orders and doing simple work. That is where you belong." The chamber filled with more approving sounds. Some delegates were actually standing now, showing their support for Thane's words. James saw species that had once traded peacefully with humans, now nodding along with talk of slavery. The mob mentality was taking over, and humanity was the target. James reached into his jacket and pulled out a small communication device. Several Vorthan guards tensed, their hands moving toward their weapons. But James just held the device calmly, making no threatening moves. "For 300 years," he said, "humanity has tried to find a peaceful place in this galaxy. We have followed every law, respected every treaty, and honored every agreement. We have offered friendship to those who would accept it, and we have turned the other cheek to those who would not. And you will continue to do so," Thane said with complete confidence. "Because you have no choice. Your fleets are small and weak. Your technology is centuries behind ours. You need the Council's protection to survive." James nodded slowly. "You're right about one thing, Council Leader Thane. We have no choice." He raised the communication device to his lips. "But neither do you." The chamber grew quiet. Something in James's tone had changed. The casual dismissal and easy contempt from the delegates was being replaced by uncertainty. James had always been respectful before, even when delivering protests about human deaths. Now there was something different in his voice, something that made even the most arrogant council members pay attention. "Control, this is Ambassador Reed," James said into the device. "The council has made their position clear. New Eden was just the beginning. They consider humanity to be a pest that needs to be controlled or eliminated." He paused and looked directly at Thane. "Code Red is authorized. Humanity formally withdraws from all galactic accords, effective immediately." The silence in the chamber was complete. Even the constant hum of the environmental system seemed to grow quiet. Every delegate was staring at James now, trying to understand what they had just heard. "Impossible," Thane said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Your species cannot survive without council protection. You will come crawling back within a week, begging for readmission." James smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant smile. "Council Leader Thane, you've made one very serious mistake. You assumed that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war. You assumed that because we asked for your friendship, we needed your protection. You assumed that because we turned the other cheek, we had no teeth." He began walking toward the chamber's exit, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. At the great doors, he turned back to face the hundreds of alien delegates. "Today, you will learn the difference between choosing to be peaceful and being forced to be peaceful. Today, you will discover what happens when humanity's patience finally runs out." The doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. Admiral Kate Morgan stood on the bridge of the human flagship Retribution, watching the stars through the massive viewing screen. Her ship floated in the empty space between solar systems, invisible to any scanning technology the galaxy had ever seen. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring signals from across the galaxy. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Tom Brady from the communications station. "Ambassador Reed's signal just came through. Code Red is confirmed." Kate nodded slowly. She had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. As commander of humanity's Shadow Fleet, she knew secrets that most humans didn't even suspect existed. While the galaxy saw humanity as weak and scattered, the truth was very different. "Send the activation signal to all fleet commanders," Kate ordered. "Operation Reckoning begins now." The communications officer's fingers moved quickly across his console. Across the void of space, hidden human ships began receiving their orders. Ships that had been waiting in the darkness for decades suddenly came alive with purpose. Kate turned to her tactical officer. "Major Wilson, what's the status of our first target?" Major Lisa Wilson consulted her displays. "Kepler Station is exactly where our intelligence said it would be, Admiral. The Vorthen shipyards are operating at full capacity. They have 67 warships under construction and another 43 in their defensive fleet." "Perfect," Kate said. "And they have no idea we're coming." The truth was something the galaxy would never have believed. For 200 years, while enduring raids and attacks, humanity had been building. They had developed technology in secret, using resources from hidden mining operations in asteroid fields that no one else wanted. They had recruited the best minds from every human world and given them unlimited budgets to solve one simple problem: how to make the galaxy's tormentors pay. The result was the most advanced fleet ever built. Human ships used engines that bent space itself, making them faster than anything the Vorthens or their allies could field. Their hulls were made from materials that absorbed sensor waves instead of reflecting them, making them completely invisible. Their weapons used principles of physics that alien scientists hadn't even discovered yet. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Lieutenant Brady announced. Kate looked at the tactical display showing the locations of her ships. 50 human vessels surrounded Kepler Station, each one invisible to the massive Vorthen facility. The Vorthens had no idea that death was already surrounding them. "Begin the attack," Kate ordered. The first sign of trouble for the Vorthens came when their sensor operators noticed something impossible. Ships were appearing on their screens from nowhere, materializing out of empty space like ghosts becoming solid. But these weren't the small, weak human vessels they were used to seeing. These were massive warships that radiated power. Captain Hans Mueller commanded the lead attack ship, the Vengeance. His ship dropped its stealth field just long enough to fire a single shot at the nearest Vorthen battleship. The weapon struck with devastating force, cutting the alien vessel completely in half. The two pieces spun away into space, already beginning to burn. "Target destroyed," reported Mueller's weapons officer. "Moving to the next one." All around Kepler Station, the same scene repeated itself. Human ships appeared, fired once, and vanished again. Each shot destroyed its target completely. The Vorthen defenders tried to fight back, but they couldn't target enemies. They couldn't see. Admiral Corvin of the Vorthen Defense Fleet watched in horror from his command ship as his entire force was systematically destroyed. Ships that had taken years to build were being cut apart in seconds. His sensor operators were screaming that contacts kept appearing and disappearing faster than they could track. "Get me a firing solution on any of them," Corvin shouted. "We can't lock onto them, sir," his tactical officer replied. "They appear for maybe 2 seconds, fire, and then vanish again. Our targeting computers can't work that fast." Corvin's command ship shuddered as something hit it. Warning alarms began blaring as atmosphere rushed out through a massive hole in the hull. He looked at his damaged display and felt his blood turn cold. Whatever had hit them had carved through 3 decks like they were made of paper. In 15 minutes, it was over. The entire Vorthen defense fleet at Kepler Station had been destroyed. Not damaged or disabled, but completely annihilated. Burning wreckage drifted through space where proud warships had been moments before, but the human ships weren't finished. They turned their attention to the shipyards themselves. Admiral Kate Morgan watched from her command ship as her forces began there. "Real work, use precision strikes only," she commanded. "Military targets only. No civilian casualties." Captain Elena Vasquez led the attack on the main construction facility. Her ship positioned itself carefully above the shipyard's main assembly area. The weapon she fired wasn't designed to destroy the building, but to disable it permanently. The energy beam passed through the structure's shields like they didn't exist, and struck the main power core. The shipyard went dark instantly. Emergency lighting flickered on, but the massive construction equipment stopped moving. Half-built Vorthan warships hung motionless in their building frames. Their construction permanently halted. Similar strikes hit every military facility around Kepler Station. Weapons factories, training centers, and supply depots were all systematically disabled, but the civilian areas were left completely untouched. Human ships even helped evacuate workers from damaged military buildings. Within 2 hours, the most important Vorthan military facility in this sector of the galaxy had been rendered completely useless. Admiral Corvin, floating in an escape pod among the wreckage of his fleet, could only watch in stunned silence, but Kepler Station was just the beginning. Kate's fleet was already moving to their next targets. Across 3 star systems, similar attacks were happening simultaneously. The Third Human Fleet, commanded by Admiral David Park, struck the Vorthan Naval Academy at Nova Point. The 7th Fleet hit the main supply depot at Rigel Base. The 12th Fleet destroyed the research station where the Vorthans developed their newest weapons. Each attack followed the same pattern. Human ships appeared from nowhere, destroyed everything military in sight, and vanished again. They moved so fast that by the time news of one attack reached Vorthan Command, 3 more had already happened. The galaxy's communication networks exploded with emergency transmissions. News services struggled to keep up with reports of impossible attacks happening everywhere at once. The weak, harmless humans had just destroyed the military might of one of the galaxy's major powers in a single, coordinated strike. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Kate Morgan reviewed the reports coming in from her fleet commanders. Every target had been hit exactly as planned. Every military objective had been achieved. And most importantly, civilian casualties were 0. "Admiral," Lieutenant Brady called out, "we're receiving transmissions from every major government in the galaxy. They're all demanding to know how we did this." Kate smiled grimly. "Tell them they'll find out soon enough." This was just the first lesson. She turned to Major Wilson. "What's our next target?" "The Vorthan Home System, Admiral. Intelligence reports their main fleet is gathering there for a counterattack." Kate nodded. "Perfect. It's time to show them what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." The Retribution's engines hummed to life, bending space around the massive ship. Within moments, the flagship and its escorts had vanished into hyperspace, heading for the heart of the Vorthan Empire. Behind them, Kepler Station burned in the darkness, a testament to the price of underestimating humanity. The sleeping giant had finally awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Krallick's hive mind was not used to feeling fear. For 1,000 years, their insect warriors had been the terror of the galaxy. Their hive ships had conquered dozens of worlds, and their queens ruled through pure intimidation. But as reports came in about the destruction of Vorthan forces, something new stirred in their collective consciousness. Queen Zara, the supreme leader of the Krallick's empire, stood in her massive throne chamber surrounded by her warrior generals. Her 6 arms gestured angrily as she spoke to her advisors. "The humans think they can threaten us because they destroyed some Vorthan ships," she hissed through her mandibles. "They forget that we are not the Vorthans, we are the Krallicks. We do not run from fights." General Rex, her chief military commander, clicked his claws together nervously. "My queen, perhaps we should wait and see what the humans want. Their attacks were very precise. They only hit military targets." Queen Zara's eyes flashed with rage. Are you suggesting we show weakness to these vermin? The Kralix bowed to no one. She turned to face the massive viewing screen that showed the locations of human colonies. Launch immediate attacks on all human settlements in sectors 7 through 12. Show the galaxy that the Kralix are not afraid of these upstart mammals. Within hours, Kralix hive ships were moving toward human colonies. Their massive vessels, each one the size of a small city, dropped out of hyperspace near 3 different human worlds. The insect warriors prepared for easy victories against the defenseless human settlements. But the humans were no longer defenseless. Captain Alex Turner commanded the Human Defense Force, protecting the colony world of Haven. His ship, the Defender, was one of the new generation of human warships that the galaxy had never seen before. When the Kralix hive ship Dominator appeared in Haven's orbit, Alex was ready for them. All stations prepare for combat, Alex ordered calmly. His crew had trained for this moment for years. Remember, these aren't the same insects that have been bullying human colonies for decades. Today, they learn what happens when they pick. A fight with Earth's children. The Dominator launched hundreds of smaller attack craft toward Haven's surface. Each one carried 50 Kralix warriors, armed with energy weapons and ready to slaughter human civilians. But they never reached the ground. Human fighter pilots, flying ships that moved faster than anything the Kralix had ever encountered, tore through the insect formation like wolves among sheep. The new human fighters used weapons that fired concentrated energy beams, cutting through Kralix armor like it was made of paper. Lieutenant Mike Chen led the first fighter squadron into battle. His ship danced through the swarm of Kralix fighters, destroying 3 enemies with each burst of weapons fire. Behind him, 19 other human pilots followed his lead, each one a master of their advanced craft. "This is Red Leader," Mike announced. Over the communications channel. "The bugs are falling like rain. I count 40 enemy fighters destroyed, and we haven't lost a single ship." Back on the Dominator, Kralix commanders watched their attack force being systematically annihilated. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were dominating the battle completely. Ships that should have been easy prey were cutting through Kralix forces with impossible efficiency. "How are they moving so fast?" demanded Sub-Queen Vera, the hive ship's commander. "Our fighters should be superior to anything these humans can build." Her tactical officer's antennae twitched with confusion. "Unknown, my queen, human fighters appear to have technology we have never encountered. They are faster, more maneuverable, and their weapons are far more powerful than our intelligence suggested." The Dominator itself shuddered as something massive struck its hull. Captain Alex Turner's ship had closed to point-blank range and opened fire with its main weapons. The energy beams carved through the hive ship's thick armor like a hot knife through ice. "Impossible!" Sub-Queen Vera screamed. "Our armor is the strongest in the galaxy." The human ship fired again, and another section of the hive ship exploded into space. Emergency alarms blared throughout the massive vessel as atmosphere rushed out through dozens of hull breaches. Meanwhile, in the crystal cities of the Nexari homeworld, a different kind of war was beginning. The Nexari had built their empire on economic power and information control. Their crystal technology networked the entire galaxy's financial system, and they had used this power to strangle human trade for centuries, but they had never faced anyone like Ghost of. The human cyber warfare specialist sat in a hidden facility deep beneath the surface of a forgotten asteroid. Her real name was classified at the highest levels of human government. To the galaxy, she was simply known as Ghost, the phantom who could walk through any computer system like it was made of air. Beginning Phase 1 of economic warfare, Ghost reported to her handlers through an encrypted channel. "Nexari banking systems are completely open to me. They never imagined anyone could break their crystal encryption." Her fingers moved across. Holographic displays, navigating through the most secure networks in the galaxy as if they were children's toys. The Nexari had made a fatal mistake. They had built their entire system around the assumption that their crystal technology was unbreakable. They had never considered that humans might have developed quantum computers that could crack their codes in seconds. One by one, Ghost began shutting down critical systems throughout Nexari space. Banking networks crashed as account records were scrambled beyond repair. Power grids failed as control systems locked out their operators. Transportation networks ground to a halt as traffic control computers began giving random instructions. In the Nexari capital city of Crystal Prime, Chancellor Lux watched in horror as his empire's technology turned against itself. The beautiful crystal spires that powered their civilization were going dark one by one. How is this possible? He demanded of his technical advisors. Our security systems are perfect. No one can break crystal encryption. Chief Technician Prism's crystalline body flickered with confused patterns of light. The intrusion appears to be coming from everywhere and nowhere, Chancellor. Our security programs cannot even detect the source of the attack. As the Nexari stumbled in the dark and the Kralix burned in space, news of humanity's counterattacks spread across the galaxy. Species that had been preparing to join the assault on human colonies suddenly reconsidered their positions. The weak, helpless humans had just destroyed two of the galaxy's major military powers in a matter of hours. On Haven, Captain Alex Turner watched the burning wreckage of the Kralix hive ship drift through space. His ship's weapons had torn the massive vessel apart piece by piece. The few surviving Kralix were fleeing in escape pods, their dreams of easy conquest shattered forever. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving similar reports from colonies across human space. Every Kralix attack has been repelled. Their fleets are either destroyed or retreating." Alex nodded grimly. "Send a message to Kralix space. Tell them that any further attacks on human civilians will result in the complete destruction of their hive worlds." In her hidden base, Ghost was putting the finishing touches on her assault against the Nexari. With a final keystroke, she activated a virus that would spread through every crystal network in their empire. The virus wouldn't destroy their technology, but it would make sure the Nexari could never again use their economic power to hurt humanity. "Phase 1 complete," she reported. "The Nexari economic empire just collapsed. They won't be able to buy a sandwich, let alone fund attacks on human colonies." Across the galaxy, other species watched the destruction of their former allies with growing alarm. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning decisively. Ships that had seemed invincible were being cut apart like toys. Economic systems that had controlled galactic trade for centuries were crumbling in hours. The message was becoming clear to everyone who cared to listen. Humanity had been holding back for 300 years, showing restraint that the galaxy had mistaken for weakness. Now that restraint was gone, and the true power of human civilization was being revealed for the first time, the day of reckoning had begun, and there was no force in the galaxy that could stop it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 1,000-year history. Representatives from dozens of species filled the great chamber, but instead of the usual arrogant confidence, there was only fear. The same delegates who had laughed at humanity just days before now whispered nervously among themselves. Council. Leader Thane of the Vorthan Empire sat in his seat like a broken shell. His once proud military uniform was wrinkled and stained. Dark circles under his yellow eyes showed he hadn't slept since the attacks began. Around him, other Vorthan delegates looked equally defeated. The massive viewing screens around the chamber showed the destruction that had swept across the galaxy in just 72 hours. Vorthan shipyards burned in space. Kralix hive worlds sat dark and powerless under human blockades. Nexari crystal cities flickered with failing power systems. The three most powerful military forces in the galaxy had been reduced to smoking ruins. "Order, order," called the council speaker, a tall, thin alien from the peaceful Etherian race. His voice shook as he tried to control the panicking delegates. "We must find a way to respond to this human aggression." "Respond?" shouted Delegate Crix of the Kralix, her mandibles clicking wildly. "Half my hive fleets are destroyed. The other half are trapped in their home systems by human ships that we cannot even see on our sensors. What response do you suggest?" Chancellor Lux of the Nexari flickered between different colors rapidly, a sign of extreme distress in his species. "My entire economic network has collapsed. Banking, trade, communications, everything is controlled by human cyber attacks. We cannot even buy fuel for our ships." From across the chamber, smaller species representatives watched the panic of their former oppressors with quiet satisfaction. The Aldari, whose worlds had been raided by Vorthan pirates for decades, sat calmly in their seats. The Kafians, who had been forced to pay tribute to the Kralix, watched the insect delegation's fear with barely hidden smiles. The great doors of the chamber opened with their familiar rumble. But this time, the figure who walked through them was not a pleading diplomat. General Marcus Stone of the Human Defense Forces strode down the central aisle with the confidence of a man who held all the cards. Marcus was a different type of human than the council had dealt with before. Where Ambassador Reed had been diplomatic and respectful, Marcus was a soldier through and through. His black military uniform was perfectly pressed, and his medals caught the chamber's lighting. But it was his eyes that made even the bravest delegates uncomfortable. They were the cold, calculating eyes of a predator. Behind Marcus walked a small escort of human soldiers. Their equipment was clearly advanced, but they carried their weapons casually, as if the entire Galactic Council posed no threat at all. The message was clear. Humanity no longer feared anyone in this chamber. "Honored Council," Marcus said as he reached the speaking platform. His voice carried easily through the chamber, but there was no respect in his tone. "I come before you, not as a supplicant, but as the representative of a species that you have finally pushed too far." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the usual background noise of environmental systems seemed to quiet down. Every delegate leaned forward, desperate to hear what the humans wanted. "For 300 years, Marcus continued, humanity has endured systematic persecution in this galaxy. Our trade ships have been seized. Our colonies have been raided. Our people have been killed, enslaved, and treated as less than animals. And through it all, we remained peaceful." Thane tried to interrupt. "Your species was granted protection under galactic law." "Silence," Marcus said quietly. The single word carried such authority that the Vorthan leader immediately stopped talking. "You will speak when I give you permission to speak." Marcus activated a holographic projector, and images filled the air above the speaking platform. They showed the destruction of human colonies, the massacre at New Eden, and dozens of other attacks on human settlements. The images were graphic and undeniable. "You called us vermin," Marcus said, looking directly at Thane. "You called us pests. That needed to be controlled. You laughed when we asked for justice. You celebrated when our children died." His voice remained calm, but there was something terrifying in that calmness. "Well, congratulations. You have successfully awakened something that should have been left sleeping." The holographic display changed, now showing the results of human retaliation. Burning Vorthan ships drifted through space. Kralix Hive world sat powerless under human occupation. Nexari cities struggled with failing technology. "This is what happens when you mistake patience for weakness," Marcus announced. "For 3 centuries, you assumed that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war. You were wrong." "Delegate." Crix's voice cracked as she spoke. "What do you want from us?" Marcus smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Justice." reparations for every human life lost, the return of all territory stolen from human colonies, the establishment of human-protected zones throughout the galaxy where our people can live without fear of attack. Impossible, Thane said weakly. The Council cannot agree to such demands. The Council no longer has a choice, Marcus replied. He gestured to his aide, who activated another holographic display. This one showed the current positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. As we speak, human forces are positioned above the homeworlds of every species that participated in attacks on our people. The display was terrifying in its implications. Human ships surrounded dozens of populated worlds, each one capable of reducing entire planets to rubble. But they weren't attacking, they were simply waiting. You see, Marcus explained, we could have simply destroyed your worlds and been done with it. We have the firepower to reduce every hostile planet to radioactive ash, but that would make us like you. Instead, we choose to be better. Chancellor Lux's crystalline form flickered rapidly. You speak of being better, but you hold our worlds hostage. We hold your worlds accountable, Marcus corrected. There is a difference. We are not threatening to kill your civilians. We are promising to defend ours. The choice of what happens next is entirely yours. Behind Marcus, one of his aides stepped forward and whispered something in his ear. The general nodded and turned back to the council. I've just received word that the Vorthan homeworld's orbital defenses have been neutralized, he announced. Casually, the process was completely bloodless. We simply turned off their weapon systems. Your people are unharmed, but your military capabilities no longer exist. Thane's face went pale. His homeworld, the center of the Vorthan Empire, was now completely defenseless. Human ships could do whatever they wanted to his people, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. How? He whispered. The same way we've done everything else, Marcus replied. With technology you can't understand and capabilities you never suspected we possessed. We've been preparing for this day for 200 years. Every insult, every attack, every death has been carefully recorded and planned for. Marcus walked closer to Thane's section of seating. The Vorthan leader actually pressed back into his chair, trying to get away from the human general. You wanted to know your place in the galaxy, Marcus said softly. Now you do. You are at the mercy of the species you thought was weak. Your survival depends on the patience of the people you called vermin. The chamber erupted in panicked voices as delegates from dozens of species began arguing among themselves. Some called for surrender, others for continued resistance. A few smaller species that had never participated in anti-human activities quietly began making plans to ally themselves with Earth. Marcus stood calmly in the center of the chaos, waiting for quiet to return. When it finally did, he delivered his final message. You have 24 hours to accept our terms, he announced. After that, we will begin implementing our own solutions to the problems you have created. And I promise you, you will like our solutions much less than our current offer. He turned and began walking toward the chamber's exit, his escort following into step behind him. At the great doors, he paused and looked back at the terrified delegates. The age of human weakness is over. What comes next depends entirely on how quickly you learn to respect that fact. 6 months had passed since the day that changed everything. The galaxy looked nothing like it had before humanity's patience ran out. Where once the Vorthan Empire had dominated trade routes, human patrol ships now kept the peace. Where Kralix raiders had terrorized innocent worlds, human defense fleets stood watch. Where Nixari economic manipulation had strangled entire civilizations, fair trade agreements now flourished. Admiral Kate Morgan stood on the observation deck of her flagship, now orbiting the former Vorthan capital world of Vorthic Prime. Planet below showed signs of reconstruction, but not the kind anyone would have expected. Instead of the brutal military installations that had once covered the surface, New cities were being built. Cities designed for commerce and culture, not conquest. "Admiral," called Captain Rivera from behind her. "The monthly sector reports are ready for your review." Kate turned from the viewing window. In the 6 months since the reckoning, she had become something she never expected to be, the Keeper of Galactic Peace. The title was unofficial, but the reality was undeniable. When disputes arose between species, they came to her. When trade routes needed protection, they asked for human ships. When justice was needed, they looked to Earth. "What's the situation in the Outer Rim?" Kate asked as she reviewed the datapad. "Surprisingly quiet," Rivera replied. "The Zalarian Consortium tried to restart their old protection racket, but when they heard human ships were investigating, they immediately backed down. They're now applying for legitimate trade licenses." Kate nodded. The Zalarians had been minor players in the old system, but they had learned quickly. Many species had adapted to the new reality with remarkable speed. Those who had cooperated with human demands found themselves prospering under the new order. Those who had resisted were no longer in positions to cause trouble. On the surface of Vorthak Prime, former council leader Thane worked in his new office as Minister of Reconstruction. It was a far cry from his old position of power, but he had learned to appreciate being alive. The humans had kept their word about avoiding civilian casualties, but they had been absolutely ruthless about dismantling the military systems that had oppressed the galaxy. Thane's assistant, a young Vorthan named Kyle, entered with the daily reports. "Sir, the human advisors have approved the new education curriculum. They're particularly pleased with the sections on interspecies cooperation." "Good," Thane replied. He had spent months learning to work with human administrators, and he had to admit they were remarkably fair. Unlike the old Vorthan system, which had been built on fear and domination, the new order actually seemed to care about the welfare of ordinary citizens. The changes weren't limited to former enemy worlds. Throughout the galaxy, species that had been oppressed for centuries were discovering what it meant to live without fear. The Aldari had rebuilt their merchant fleets and were now major players in interstellar trade. The Kafians had established universities and research centers, free from the constant threat of Kralix raids. In the Nexari territories, the Crystal Cities had been rebuilt with human technology integrated into their systems. The result was a more stable and secure network that couldn't be used to manipulate other species. Chancellor Lux had initially resisted the changes, but when he saw how much more prosperous his people became under the new system, he had become one of humanity's strongest supporters. Ambassador James Reed, the man who had started it all with his final warning to the Council, now worked from a new office on the space station that had replaced the old council chambers. The station was built with human technology but designed by representatives from every species in the galaxy. It was a symbol of the new cooperative order that had emerged from the ashes of the old system. "Ambassador," called his aide, a Tenthari named Flip. "The Andorian delegation is here for their appointment." James smiled as he prepared to meet with yet another species, seeking to establish formal relations with humanity. The Andorians had been neutral during the old regime, but they had watched humanity's rise with great interest. Like many species, they wanted to be on the right side of history. The Andorian ambassador, a tall blue-skinned humanoid named Tor, entered with obvious nervousness. Despite humanity's reputation for fairness, many aliens still found it difficult to believe that their former victims wouldn't seek revenge. "Ambassador Reed," Tor said with a respectful bow, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Please sit," James replied warmly. "What can humanity do for the Andorian Republic?" "We wish to establish a formal alliance," Tor said carefully. "Our people have watched the changes in the galaxy with great interest. We believe that cooperation with humanity would benefit both our civilizations." James nodded. It was a conversation he'd had dozens of times in recent months. Species after species had come to him seeking partnerships, trade agreements, or protection pacts. Some were motivated by fear, but many were genuinely impressed by humanity's approach to governance. "What kind of cooperation are you interested in?" James asked. "We have advanced medical technology that we believe could benefit human colonies." Tor replied, "In exchange, we would like access to your defensive systems and trade networks." It was a fair offer, and James knew would be accepted. The new human policy was simple: treat others with respect and fairness, and you would receive the same in return. Try to harm human citizens or allies, and you would face the full might of humanity's military. In the depths of space, General Marcus Stone commanded the human military forces that maintained the new order. His ships patrolled the trade routes, investigated disputes, and served as a visible reminder that the galaxy had changed forever. But unlike the old Vorthan or Krulix fleets, human ships were welcomed rather than feared. "General," reported Colonel Harris from the communications station, "we've received a distress call from the Epsilon sector. A group of pirates is attacking a civilian convoy." "Dispatch the 5th Squadron," Marcus ordered. "Full engagement protocols. Make sure the pirates understand that attacking civilians is no longer profitable." Within hours, the pirate ships were either destroyed or fleeing for their lives. The convoy was saved, and word spread quickly through the galactic underworld. Crime didn't pay in the new order. Human justice was swift and certain. The changes weren't just political or military. Throughout the galaxy, a new culture was emerging. Art and literature flourished as species no longer had to focus all their resources on survival. Scientific cooperation led to breakthroughs that benefited everyone. Even former enemies found themselves working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. On Earth, President Sarah Chun addressed the Global Assembly in a speech that was broadcast throughout human space. She spoke of the responsibility that came with power and the importance of using that power wisely. The galaxy was watching humanity's every move, and it was crucial that they prove themselves worthy of the trust they had been given. "We did not seek this position," she said to the assembled representatives. "We were forced into it by the actions of those who mistook our peaceful nature for weakness. But now that we have it, we must use it to build something better than what came before." The speech was translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. It was a message of hope for those who had suffered under the old system, and a warning to those who might consider challenging the new one. In the end, the galaxy had learned a simple lesson: humanity's greatest strength was not their advanced technology or their military might, but their ability to choose when to use that power. For 3 centuries, they had chosen peace even when it cost them dearly. When that choice was taken away from them, they had shown what happened when a patient people finally ran out of patience. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity's restraint ended. More importantly, it would never forget the wisdom with which they had rebuilt what their enemies had tried to destroy. The age of fear and oppression was over. The age of cooperation and mutual respect had begun, and at its heart stood humanity, no longer victims but guardians of a better tomorrow.